Hey, I'm live. I'm putting my phone on Do Not Disturb so it won't bug me. Um, what can I say? I was supposed to air 10 minutes ago and technology. What can I say? Couple things, little different from what I originally talked about. First of all, I've got my dog back there. So if you hear him bark or scream or looking out the window, we'll try to ignore him. It's a live event. What can I do? Um, Second of all, is I I did not learn to do video editing last week as I had hoped to. So I guess that point is now null and void because I didn't upload my original. I didn't manage to get done. So anyway, next week is another week. We'll try again. Um, in the meantime, I'm Marisol. Hi. I I know my camera keeps going back and forth. I think it's because I use my hands a lot. So I'm going to work on keeping my hands down here outside of view of the camera so that maybe it won't go in and out of focus quite so much. So today I want to discuss stress and anxiety management, but within the context of the Enfield Poltergeist case, which is one of history's more documented paranormal events. It's probably not the most documented, but it's got a lot of documentation. I think I should also let you know that I can't really tell if I can see the chat. So until somebody messages me, if I don't respond, that's why I can't see the chat. Again, it's live. I don't know what's going to happen from 1 minute to the next. So anyway, back to my purpose of this thing, and I'll keep my hand down. I want to explore how stress, anxiety, and fear affected this case and share some insights, ideas, techniques that might help in managing these emotions. At least I can give you what's worked for me. I'm not an expert in every case out there, but I can at least tell you what's worked for me, and we can go from there. And always realize that if you want to increase your stress and anxiety management strategies, give me a call, text me, email me, whatever it is you want to do. Let me know because I can help with that. I'm not a professional, but I can help with that. Anyway, the Enfield case. Um, it was a big deal in the 70s, I want to say 78, 78. I could be wrong about the dates. If anybody catches this, you can let me know if I'm totally wrong. I'm sure you will. And it took place in Enfield, London, which is why it's the Enfield case. It was and it was a poltergeist case. It was, things were flying off of everything, walls, shelves, cabinets. It was things were flying. Um, Voices were being had or heard, I should say. Terror was being had. So it was a big deal. It was a major deal. And I hope I'm not talking too loudly. Let me try to move my mic a little bit. I tend to talk loudly. So, so the investigation attracted quite a bit of media attention. It was a media circus. It was an international media circus. So it was quite the deal, back then. One of the reasons I think it caught so much of the mainstream media and mainstream community in general's interest is because we had some fairly credible um, witnesses to this. We not only had the main investigators and photographers to the case, but we also had quite a bit of police in and out of there. Detectives, regular beat cops. All of them. We had a million journalists probably in and out of there, and some of them had to be credible. And then such as it was, you decide on whether this was good or not. We had the clergy, usually seen as dependable witnesses, not always. Um, I'm sorry, you guys. I am just so messed up today because I wasn't expecting to do this live. But I'm doing it live, so you get to see me in all my nervous glory. And let's see. So we got good credible witnesses to that. We also have a ton of evidence to it. So we don't have video evidence because probably back then we're still dealing with film, and film is harder to set up, especially with and crazy little ghosts that don't like to stay in one position all the time. So what we have is photographs and audio recordings, pictures and tape, probably tape. And we also have some evidence of physical evidence of poltergeist activity. We also have quite a bit of stuff from the family themselves, the people it was directly involving, as well as the investigators probably have some live incidences too. So that's all there. Um, we have, and some of those you can actually Google and look up on the internet. I saw quite a bit of it. It was interesting. So the investigators involved in this were quite the team, although they didn't work as a team normally, and not even in this one, but they came together for the same things. Maurice Gross is the first one that I'm going to mention. He was a paranormal investigator back in the day, and he interviewed the family extensively. He also took copious amounts of pictures. And like I said, he probably experienced quite a bit as well. Um, the other person was Guy Leon Playfair, and I'm assuming that is a French name, which is why it came out that way. I don't know for sure, so I might be pronouncing it or mispronouncing it. But it's spelled Guy Lion with an I with a Y. I'm assuming again it's Guy Leon, and if it's American or if it's an English name, it might be Guy Lion or Leon. Anyway, Guy Guy Leon Playfair, his last name is Playfair, was a paranormal psychologist who evaluated the family, which, is another way of saying he interviewed them and then he drew some conclusions about their mental health. And he took another copious amount of pictures. You can find those online too. Really interesting pictures to look at. Give it a call or give it a look. Both of those they were seen by the mainstream community as reliable and credible. In part, I don't want to see completely a reason, but in part because they use um, wow, words when you're nervous, right? They used scientific methods for gathering their data, and that's what it was that really appealed to people. So they were good people to have in there. And the last set of people that I want to talk about are kind of rock stars in the paranormal community. They contributed a lot into this world for the paranormal activity. They were major influences. I mean, if they had Facebook back then, they probably would have been way beyond Mark Zuckerberg with it. So, I mean, they were big deals. And their name was Ed and Lorraine Warren. His name, his name, his his gig was demonology, and he consulted quite a bit with the Catholic Church about demonology. Um, and his wife, his lovely wife Lorraine, was a clairvoyant who was really sensitive to ghosties and goblins and things that go bump in the night, that on a level that not all of us can be. Um, and, they kind of wrote the book on the paranormal. So it was a big deal. It was quite the big deal. And I'm sorry, I got people texting me and emailing, and I'm not going to pay attention to it anymore. Anyway, sorry about that. So Ed and Lorraine Warren were big deals in the community. They were the rock stars of our community. They still are in a lot of ways. We still take our cues from a lot of things that they've done. The thing to remember about them is that they were very Catholic. I don't know if that's the kind of thing that would affect your thought processes in that. I just thought it was fair to share. So let's talk a little bit about stress anxiety. Um, Stress and anxiety, I'm sorry. Stress and anxiety, a lot of us deal with it. I mean, I'm one of them. I have massive stresses and major anxiety that I keep control of with a daily regimen of certain self-care techniques, and also with the help of some professionals. But I'll get into that later. So, I my cog my the stress and anxiety. I'm sorry, I had a hard time finding where I was in my notes. Stress and anxiety can manifest themselves physically, emotionally, mentally, possibly spiritually. They can affect your relationships, and at the very, very least, it's going to affect your overall well-being. So how you deal with your day-to-day life, um, in part has to do with how you deal with your stress and anxiety. Not completely, but in part. So, and then there's a couple of things you have to remember is that it can affect your cognitive um, functions. My nerves right now are affecting my own cognitive functions. So it can impact your thinking patterns, it can impact your concentration, it can mess with your memory and your decision making. It's not pretty when it gets to the end result, and it's not when it gets to your cognitive abilities, it gets really ugly. So you want to stay on top of your stress and anxiety. And the interpersonal changes, that's going to add a strain to your relationships. I'm seeing it daily in my house. We all have stresses in this house, and it's not easy to deal with. So it'll cause conflicts, might even cause outright fights. Um, it can mess with the way you perceive money and how you think you should be spending it. So it's really a mess. I think the most hurtful part about it is that it really messes with your sense of community. When you're stressed, you tend to feel very isolated and very alone. So stress and anxiety can really mess with that. So there are some techniques that can be helpful in that. Again, I said that these are things that I do daily. Well, some of these things are things that I do daily. You have to with stress and anxiety. It's like that funny little pill that the doctors will prescribe and then say to you, you have to wait 3 to 5 days or maybe even up to a week before this gets into your system and you start noticing results. Same thing with stress and anxiety management. You have to keep on top of it, and it has to be incorporated into your daily life, and it has to be um, constant. You have to be very consistent with it. Otherwise, it's really not going to help you when you do get stressed and anxious. So keep that in mind. Dealing with stress and anxiety does take a time commitment. It's not a huge time commitment, but it does take a time commitment, and it takes consistency. Okay, so you're there. I got you to Enfield, England in 1970. I mean, you didn't know that outside that window I had a TARDIS involved, right? So anyway, you're there. We are outside of the premises. We are getting ready to go in. We have 24 to 48 hours before we do. What do you do to prep? Well, every paranormal investigator out there, or even just an amateur ghost hunter, is going to prep their equipment. They're going to check everything works. They're going to make sure they have enough memory storage to be able to download the footage. They're going to make sure that there are cords and batteries and enough REM pods and EVP equipment and electromagnetic frequency monitors. And I mean, we have the whole thing. So check your equipment, make sure it's all in working order. That's the first thing. Well, maybe not the first thing, but anyway, it's up there. Second thing that you really need to do is establish communication with your fractal lines. Make sure that your team lead knows that you're both on the same page. You've both got a game plan. You're going to set up some of your game plan, and that all of your team is on the same page when it comes to dealing with this investigation. So communication is key. We can't do this without teamwork. Paranormal investigating is definitely about teamwork. So keep that going. And also, it's kind of a double standard in the paranormal world because it's anyway, I'll get into why it is in a minute, but avoid caffeine. We tell people to avoid this because caffeine can make you jittery and nervous. And then, of course, if you're already jittery and nervous, it can affect how you deal with the paranormal, which then can affect your outcomes and your data and all of that. So it's a double standard because a lot of paranormal investigations happen at night, and we all have jobs during the day. So we use caffeine to keep us awake. I'm not one of those because I know what it does to me. It messes with my own anxiety, and I don't want to do that. It also keeps me awake for months at a time, it seems like. So I avoid caffeine. I didn't used to. I've learned to do it. I avoid caffeine now. And then the last, well, second to the last thing, you're going to have a stress relief plan, right? We're all going to have a stress relief plan that we designed before the investigation. Has to be done. And you have to be able to share it with at least your team lead, if not your best friend who's going with you, somebody, so that they can know what's going on. If this is the first part of your stress relief plan, is maybe, if it's appropriate to you, create a series of breaks. So we're bridging the gap from before the investigation to when we're actually in the investigation. Schedule a series of breaks. Let your team lead or your best friend or somebody else who's on your team know that you're going to be leaving at the top of every hour, or you're going to be leaving at the top and the bottom of every hour, whatever it is, whatever your increment is. You want to make sure you let them know that that's going to happen. That's also going to help with breaking up the tension, and it'll give you a chance to practice some of your stress management plan, whether that's in deep breathing exercises, which I shared in the last video, or grounding exercises. I also shared that in the last video, visualization exercises, or just talking to your friend. Make sure that that's all set up. So now we're in the investigation. You're seeing stuff already going on. If you're one of the more sensitive one of the more sensitive people on your team, you're probably feeling energies and ghosties and goblins that are sending, making the hair on the back of your neck stand up or sending shivers through you, whatever your reaction is to that. So again, we're going to use our stress management techniques to keep that under control, right? We're going to deep breathe, we're going to ground, we're going to do some visualization, we're going to lean on that heavily. And if it gets to be too much, we're going to take a break. Big deal. N- Um, Again, I know I keep stressing it, but in a paranormal investigation, you have to keep the communication lines open. Um, so I don't know. I've got somebody who's asking me for help finding this. I am going to try to send them a link really quickly. I know this is totally unprofessional, but I'm doing it anyway. Sorry. Anyway, so I'm done with that. Where's my notes? I need to find my notes again. Um, Communication has to be key. Let your team lead know if you're feeling anything strange. Let your team lead know if you heard something coming out of that closet. Let the team lead know everything. Make sure, because the team lead is the one that's going to be able to digest that information and then re or broadcast that out to the rest of the team if necessary. So um, make sure your communication lines are always open. You also want to let them know how you're feeling. Um, and the last thing that you're going to do during an investigation, if things get rough, if things get overwhelming, if you can't figure it out, and you're really uncomfortable, it is perfectly okay to leave. They are not going to have a problem with you leaving. Um, it's all right. We're not going to judge you. We're not going to. We're not going to. We're not going to make fun of you. We're not going to tease you about it. It's okay. Leave if necessary. We're completely good with that. Um, the last, and then, now we're done with the investigation. You got all the information you needed. You collected as much data as you could get. You realize, because you spoke to the family, how much stress they themselves were in. Um, Besides the paranormal, I mean, the paranormal didn't help with it, but besides the paranormal, they're they had some problems. So you're out of it. Some of it might have even been a little bit traumatic because of what you saw and heard. So decompress. Spend a couple days decompressing. I always recommend at least 2 days. Um, Sometimes it can be longer depending on how intense the scene was. I think the most that I've taken is 3 days before I checked over my data and my information. You want to talk to your family, play with your puppy, um, go hiking in the woods, enjoy a cup of tea somewhere, whatever it is that you do to decompress, do it. That's when to do it. It's going to help you with reading your data later. Um, Talk to your teammates. That's going to be everywhere and it's going to be all the time because you never know what they're going to come up with next. You also want to be able to let them know in case some residual energy followed you home. It's a thing in the paranormal. A lot of us deal with it. Who knows what it means? Who knows? It might even mean we're all suffering from mass hysteria. At the moment, though, we're going to assume that it means something. And so you make sure you talk to your teammates about it. And if further action needs to be taken, then it will be. Process your emotions. Now, I do this with journaling. I journal a lot. I also do this with my professional team. I have a therapist. So if those don't work for you, you might either do some research, give me a buzz, because this is kind of what I'm starting to teach now. Um, Play with it. You're going to find your own method for processing emotions if you don't already have one. The big thing is try to realize that some of it is going to be from the investigation itself, and it's not endemic of you. And some of it may just be your own personal style. So make sure you process that and separate it out as you need to. And then the last thing I want you to do, especially if you're in the process of processing emotions, but this can be drawn all across the board is prioritize your self-care. You have to come first. So, if you're not healthy emotionally, physically, spiritually, any of that, then your interpretation of your data isn't going to be. Whether that means it's going to be wrong, whether that means it's going to be inaccurate, we don't know yet, but let's try to keep all of those variables at a minimum. So, prioritize your self-care. It's also going to help with your stress and anxiety management. If you have a good self-care plan um, set up, your anxiety and your stress is going to become more manageable. May not ever go away, unfortunately, but it is something that can be managed. So, let's talk a little bit about fear and how it um, affected both the family the and possibly you. So, fear. I mean, we just dealt with some major stuff, right? Like I said, you had demons coming out of the woodworks, crosses were going upside down if the movie was to be believed. Um, the house, I mean, windows were being busted and I mean, it was a mess. It was an absolute mess. And I would not be surprised if you had some moments of fear in your life in that moment when you're in the Enfield and the Enfield case. So fear is a powerful emotion. And it's really scary. And some of its physiological effects can really impact our experiences. So, what is fear? Well, you all know what fear is. It's like stress and anxiety taken to the nth degree. It's the fight or flight system that triggers in us. That's from our hardwiring from clear back in our brain that was formed 20 trillion years ago or whatever it is. It tells us that yes, we can fight, or no, we better get the heck out. So, the effects of fear when fear strikes, it triggers a cascade of hormones, two of which that I'm going to talk about are cortisol and adrenaline. And they're no joke. So, cortisol, the stress hormone, increases energy so that you can run or fight, suppresses the immune system temporarily. Not sure why. Enhances focus, again, fight or flight, raises your heart rate, raises your blood pressure, slows down your digestion. Um, there are probably a number of other effects to the cortisol hormone or to the hormone cortisol, but those are the big ones. And you don't want to stay in a soup of that. You just don't want to stay there. So find ways to get rid of it. And the best way to get rid of both adrenaline and cortisol is going to be through taking a walk, going for a run, hitting the gym and working out. It's physical activity that you do for it. So minimize the stress hormone. Try to get rid of the adrenaline. Adrenaline acts in somewhat the same way. Um, it increases your heart rate and blood pressure, just like cortisol does, and it will relax your airways for better oxygen intake. But then that can also lead to hyperventilation. So be careful with that. Sharpens senses, enhances physical performance, and triggers sweating. We all get the fear sweats at some point. We can feel it coming. Um, I'm sure that athletes and other high performers like the idea that it sharpens senses and enhances physical aspects or enhances physical performance. But still, I don't think that's a good thing for the long run. You really need to get out of that soup. The goo is not good for you. So consider that goo and get it out of your life. Keep it under control at the very least. And so let's talk about the paranormal and fear. I've sent out I've sent out words when you're nervous. I'm sorry, you guys. So fear is really super common in the paranormal world. We've all done it. Even the investigators have gone through it. Even, I mean, and it can happen at any time. I mean, I've seen people who have had years of experience in the paranormal suddenly turn into a quivering little pile of goo because something happened at an experience. Likewise, you know, I've seen people really strengthen their resolve in it, but you you want to keep an eye on the fear because it can mess up an investigation. Um, it can increase your sensitivity to paranormal effects, which doesn't necessarily mean you've got more data. It just means that you're sensing something else. And because you might be under the effects of cortisol and adrenaline and generally fear, we would have to take whatever findings that you've got under under serious consideration because your fear may have messed up the results. Consider that. So the paranormal experiences and stress can intensify the paranormal experience. So if you tend to be fearful anyway, it can get you there quicker. Um, and same with anxiety. So it can also make you feel like you're more sensitive to it. And I don't mean sensitive as in, you know, your anxiety and your stress has gone up and yada, but I mean if you might think that you saw that full-bodied apparition, you might even swear on it in a court of law, but because you were in a state of fear, we have to question that sighting. So keep that in consideration too. So if you're starting to creep to fear on your investigation, go, leave. You don't want to contaminate the investigation. Contaminate? Contaminate the investigation. So keep that in mind. So it's a powerful, powerful an emotion. Powerful emotion that can really mess things up for you. And the last advice that I have is to pay attention to your fractal lines over there. Keep in touch with your team lead. Keep in touch with your team if you're the team lead. Make sure that you know what's going on. Um, and try to approach everything with an open mind or at least a calm mindset because that's going to help you in the long run for that. Now, before I totally leave fear, I want you to realize that were a few things that were involved with the Enfield case that may or may not be part of other paranormal investigations. So one thing that we know is that the family was going through some major stresses. The Mr. Hodgson, their last name was Hodgson. So Mr. Hodgson just lost his job, which doesn't help when you're trying to support a wife and raise 3 children, keep a house going. Um, he and his wife fought constantly. They had troubles making ends meet. They um, they probably picked up a few bad habits in response to their stress. So life wasn't easy for them. And on top of all of that, it seemed like their house was falling apart around them. It needed several repairs. Um, and they lived like I did for a long time with the bare minimum. So it's hard. It is really hard. So who knows if those affected the paranormal encounters that they had? I'm not sure that those would have come into play once Ed and Lorraine were there and once the other the other two investigators were there. But we don't know how it would have affected it if they were a stress-free family in the beginning. So, we don't know that. We can't go back. I mean, I know we pretended we went back, but we can't go back to that to figure it out. So in conclusion, um stress, and I probably made my camera go in and out of focus again. Stress and anxiety and fear have huge impacts on any paranormal investigation, even these. So you want to make sure that you're managing those things and make sure that they're under control, under a good control too. Um, we also know that it doesn't just affect our bodies, it can affect our cognitive functions. So, our ability to concentrate, our ability. I mean, you're seeing some of it now. I'm nervous, so I'm under stress and I'm stuttering a lot and I'm stammering and I'm skipping over words and having a hard time. But that's because I'm nervous. It'll go away. It's just that I got nervous. And in fact, as I do this, I'm getting a little bit calmer. So, um, practical stress management and anxiety management techniques are valuable tools for investigators and individuals facing life's challenges. So I highly, highly, if you take nothing else from this episode, take the fact that you have to design your wellness plan, your personal plan for staying on top of your stress management or your stressing or your anxiety management. Let me know. I can help. Call call a professional. They can help. Talk to your doctor. They can help. Do some research. That can help. Do all of this together and you'll really get some results. Get a coach, you know. Anyway, so you want to approach the paranormal with a really at the very least a balanced mindset, if not a calm mindset. Be be peaceful, be serene. And if you can't be that, at least be on an even keel. It'll help with dealing with your data when you get to it. And the last thing I want to tell you guys is have fun with it. The paranormal is one of my stress relief techniques that I use, which is why I'm on it. Um, I'm curious about what it is that they're recording. I can tell you that there is no scientific proof of paranormal phenomena yet, but an awful lot of people are gathering some information out there, and I want to know what it leads to. So that might be another way to look at it. So stay curious, stay grounded, and continue exploring and have fun with it. Tell me about your experiences. How did fear hit you? What happens to your investigations if you go into them stressed and nervous and anxious? So let me know. Keep me informed. And then also one last thing. I promise, and then I'm done. I promise. Subscribe, share, send this out to the world. I really want to grow this channel and I want to know that I'm going in the right direction with it. So if you guys don't like what I'm doing, tell me. I can find other things to talk about. And believe me, I can talk. So do it. Stick around. I want to see what happens with this. So I'm sorry about all the technical issues. I'm sorry it ran to 38 minutes. I hope that you'll come back next week because I'm just as eager as you are to find out what I'll be talking about. So, and hopefully by next week, I can figure out how to do the chat and keep up with everybody if anybody comes, if you're not catching it on the replay. So, I will talk to you soon. Hearts, thanks for your support. Bye.